Hello and welcome to Outlaw Bookseller. I thought it was time for a book haul. And is this a channel update? I haven't done one for a while. I did one just after Christmas. I tend to do one when I had another 1,000 subscribers. And obviously the last one was a 10k one. And then things went a bit bonkers with the Chris Priest video, and which was great because, you know, Chris's work deserves a lot more attention. And suddenly we find ourselves on some like 14,300 subscribers, because there was one point where I added 2,500 a week, which was really good. So upwards and onwards. And do I have a target for the end of the year? Well, yeah, I'd like to say, 20,000, but, more realistically, it's probably going to be about 17, I'd have thought. But we'll see how things go. So, do you remember when I think it was late last summer, I decided that I was going to sort of stop collecting for a while and I wasn't buying very much? Well, that's kind of gone out the window recently and it needs to come back in again, though you will see on the channel the next few weeks some more recent acquisitions, because there's things coming out, things in the mail, and then that'll probably stop for a good while, probably for the summertime, and I'll do more out and about shoots and more sort of visits to dealers and stuff. Which, how am I going to do visits to dealers and not buy things? It's going to be hard, isn't it? So we'll see, I guess. But I've just been on the phone to Dorset Bob and also to Tom Toner, my friend, the science fiction writer. So we're doing things with them as well. And hopefully Jules Burt and I will have a catch up and do it too, because it's been ages and ages. So we'll see. Speaking of collabs, there's going to be another one with me and Richard Rempel at Vintage SF. And we're filming that tomorrow. Today is Good Friday. We're actually filming it on Easter Sunday. And then you'll see that on Richard's channel next week, and you'll see a portion of it probably in my club room, my members area, which is still only $4.99. Thanks to everybody who's joined, because it does make a big difference, help keep the channel going. So recent acquisitions, what have we got? Well, what you're seeing here is a nice but not spectacular version, I should say edition of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Other Stories by Robert Louis Stevenson, which I've read millions of times. And even though I have it in a hardcover or omnibus with some other classic horror novels, even though it is, of course, a science fiction novella, it's only 77 pages long, I decided I needed a proper singleton hardcover edition. This is a Vintage Classics one. This series, they've got really nice tealing around the edges. Tealing is the correct term, of course, for the colouring of the text block, and it's got this classic sort of marbling inside, which is doubled on the text block. The laminate is kind of that strange sort of rubbery laminate, which does mark, and it did come with a sticker on the back with the barcode and ISBN. Luckily, the gum underneath it is fairly rubbery and it's rubbed off without leaving a mark, which is good, because sometimes publishers don't think about these things, So, and if you've never read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, shame on you. You really should. It's fantastic. The only thing I would say about it is that the ending is weaker than I would have liked, but I think it was the only way he could end it, really. But really great stuff. Wonderful, wonderful story. And they teach this in schools in the UK now. How lucky are children today? It was stuff like George Eliot when I was young, so there you go, which might sort of please the mainstream critics, but as for the rest of us, I'm not so certain. Anyway, onwards. I have had a bit of a Folio thing of late, and I'm generally critical of Folio because I think a lot of their books are very expensive. A lot of the illustrations are not always suitable for the texts, I feel. I think they're getting more lightweight, as are Eastern Press, and most of these sort of things are getting more lightweight in what they include. They're putting books in which are popular, but which have no real literary cachet at all, and would otherwise be forgotten, and they're sort of bringing them into a sort of fake sort of canon. Is going to bring them into the canon. I think that's completely wrong, but we won't go any further into that. They still do beautiful stuff. But I've been buying some on eBay, still sealed, of course, as is the standard. And this isn't an unboxing, and I'll just show you some I've got recently. This was less than 30 quid, and it's absolutely massive because they do things in different formats, which also irritates me because I'm a format bore, as you know. This is Paul Auster's New York trilogy. Now, this is out of print. Obviously, it's in print in mass market paperbacks, and it's a book I first read way back in the 80s, 3 novellas, and it's absolutely fantastic. And the thing with the New York trilogy, it's the sort of mainstream novel, an experimental novel, which has elements of existentialism, modernism, the detective story, and really it's something that is entirely suitable for SF fans to read, because it is quite strange. I'm going to cover this and a lot of Auster's early work in more depth later on the channel, because he is somebody I'm really passionate about, and he's no longer with us, even though I'm less keen on his later work. So this is absolutely massive, and recently I've moved my folio books all together onto a bookcase down in the living room, and I actually can't fit that one on there. It's too tall, plus that shelf is already full anyway, so what can you do? Also, those of you who will have been in the club room, who will have watched my out and about videos on the other channel I run, which is now called Outdoor Bookseller, after a couple of members here said that Walking Bookseller was a bit dull and that Outdoor Bookseller would be much better. I am dipping my toe more into Arthurian matters. This is a folio edition of Geoffrey of Monmouth's The History of the Kings of Britain, which was written in the 12th century. Now, it sounds rather dull, but of course it's pretty much fiction, and the main part of the central narrative of this is about Merlin and Arthur, and virtually everything that you would recognise as being part of the Arthurian legend pretty much comes from this book. And he claims to have based it on another book, but that's very much a medieval thing. Medieval writers did that a lot, and either those books have vanished or possibly they never existed. So they cited these other works. So there's a kind of metafictional thing going on there. And he pretty much made it all up. And I'm really enjoying it. It's actually very easy to read and thoroughly enjoyable. And it's got all sorts of Arthurian stuff in it. So I'm really getting into that. So maybe at some point when I feel I've read enough Arthurian stuff to really be a bit more authoritative, because there's some real scholars and experts out there. It's a big thing. I'll do an Arthurian video for us to sort of relish, as it were. But that's great. That was still sealed, and that's out of print as well. Finally, for my folio haul this time, because there may be more coming, I have Herman Melville's Complete Shorter Fiction, and it comes in a silver slipcase. And there we go. And it has these puddles of rainwater on the boards of a ship, and you can see a shadow there of a solitary mariner, which of course invokes Ishmael from Moby Dick. And even though I have paperback collections of the short fiction by Melville, I haven't read any of it for a very long time, and some of it I've not read at all. And I used to be a massive Melville fan in the 80s, and I'm going to go back and reread some of his stuff. One of the things I'm going to reread has particular relevance to the Book of the New Sun, and I'll talk about that when I start to do the Book of the New Sun videos, which are coming, by the way. I was going to film one today, but it's not quite ready, so that will probably appear in about a week to 10 days, I would say. I'm halfway through putting it together, really. So this is really great stuff. Melville was really important. Everybody reads Moby Dick. It's not essentially the best thing to start with, and some of the short stories are amazing. Of course, this is illustrated as well, as these things always are. So that enabled me to get rid of a couple of ratty paperbacks. If you saw my latest video in the club room, I'm going through stuff. I'm having an unhaul because it's going off to Hay-on Wye, and just to my left, out of shot, there's a load of cardboard boxes, which maybe you can see them, I don't know, which are full of things which are going to Hay. So that was my last folio for this haul. Is there going to be any science fiction? Yes, of course there is. Speaking of which, in fact, speaking of dinosaurs, look at that little sort of Tyrannosaur bookmark, which is exclusive, National History Museum, but it's exclusive to Blackwells and Foils. There you go. Isn't that good? Got one of those. Nice. And speaking of science fiction, I'm actually going to do a very quick review now of something that's on the Hugo nominations list, but it's not a novel. It's the non-fiction. It's a non-fiction book, and that's up for an award. And here it is. And this is Speculative Whiteness, Science Fiction and the Alt-Right by Jordan S. Carroll. And it's a slim little chap book, as you can see. It cost £9, and I bought this yesterday and I read it overnight. Not through the night. I read a bit last night and a bit this morning. Short, finished it off. And I do like academic writing about SF. And this is more about the alt-right than science fiction. But the basic argument it comes up with is that there's always been a tendency in genre SF towards, manifest destiny and white supremacy. And there is a certain amount of truth in that. And I immediately thought of The Iron Dream, which it does pop up in this. And of course, The Iron Dream was written by Norman Spinrad to satirize the sort of fascist tendencies and right-wing tendencies in much heroic fantasy fiction and some SF. And what Mr. Carroll does Jordan, I'm assuming it's Mr. Who Knows. And what Jordan Carroll does, let's not get into identity politics here, because it ruins everything. Let's be honest, it's ruined everything. You cannot get away from it. And that's another reason why I read this, because it's very easy to step back from these things. And what Jordan Carroll does in this is write about how people on the alt-right, particularly in the last sort of 30 years or more, but he does go back further historically, are often science fiction fans. And the general impression I get, he referred to lots of things I didn't know about, people I didn't know about, and lots of right-wing small press SF, which I wasn't aware of. It's very fringe sort of stuff. But it's good. But it is this thing where he says that the narratives that these people go for, they seem to imply that the future is only for white people. And it's good. It's an interesting read, a very interesting read. But there's several things in there which he critiques, which are Eurocentric. But he doesn't really offer any proof against them, is my feeling about this. But it was an interesting read. It's made me more aware of the alt-right and what they're saying and doing these days as regards to SF. But it's interesting, they're kind of obsessed with the sort of entry-level stuff, with Star Wars and with Dune. And yeah, and I consider Dune entry-level because it's so famous. You know, none of them seem to be into really sort of like hardcore literary SF. There's no mention of British SF in here at all. There's not really a mention of the new wave as such. And the funny thing is, he describes the plotting of some of the books and the attitudes of the characters. And what he doesn't do, he doesn't really ground his argument in, first of all, by defining what he means by certain terms he uses. And I felt that was a weakness. But it is interesting. It does hark back at one point to the big thing back in about, I think it was 2012, 2013, where there was a group of SF fans who called themselves the Sad Puppies. You can look that up if you don't know about it, who were sort of kicking back against nascent identity politics as it was then, and were arguing for more sort of pulp adventure. They weren't arguing for quality stuff. And this is the irony, both on the identity politics side, which dominates SF at the moment, and the sort of right-wing side. They're not really arguing for books which are very literary or very good. You know, they're kind of sort of cliched stuff. And we'll see. I do feel this needs a kind of accompanying volume on Afrofuturism, and I also think it's time for more objective bias, which looks at both of those things in tandem. But it was quite interesting. I'm not going to keep it. I may keep some of the references, so it is going on the sal pile. But it was interesting to read something short and academically based, if not that rigorous in terms of defining its terms and, you know, excusing some of the assumptions that it makes. But it was good, and it's a book with a good heart. Something I picked up at work, which this is somebody who friends of mine had read books by him, and that's Will Wiles. And this is The Anechoic Chamber and Other Weird Tales, published by Salt in A format. And if you have a look at it, it looks like a Picador, because an old school Picador, that is, it uses the same typefaces and things. And that's because Nicholas Royal, the Picador collector and very good writer indeed, was editorial director at Salt for a long time. And this has a couple of recommendations, praise for previous work. There's one from David Baddiel that says Wiles is basically Kafka if Kafka had spent more time in British hotels and pubs. Okay, but there's a more important one, which is fabulous in every sense. And that was something that Christopher Priest said. And I thought, well, in that case, I'm going to read it, because if my old chum thought it was good, then I certainly am going to have a go at it. And yeah, so we'll see. It'll probably be ages so I get around to it, though. You know what I'm like. Then looking into something which, at what point does something become a modern classic? That's the thing. I mean, I think there needs to be some distance. And this is a book from the 1980s, 1983, yeah. And this is The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. Now, The Woman in Black is quite a short book, but as you see, this is massive. This is a vintage cloth-bound classic with quarter cloth there and decorated boards. And it's huge. That's because for Susan Hill, The Woman in Black was a really big smash hit. and it's become part of the canon of the English ghost story. I've never read it. I'm very fond of the Nigel Neal adaptation for ITV, which was first shown on the TV in the late 80s, and I watched again a while ago, and it's excellent. And of course there's the terrible film with the rebooted Hammer one with the Harry Potter guy in it, and this is something I've never read. I have done an event with Susan Hell going back, I think it was 2018, 19, and she was really nice. She was really, really nice woman, and a fantastic event. And we had another writer along with her. It was Belle Mooney, who used to do a lot of journalism for newspapers, write book as well. And it was a really, really great pro event, and it was good for me because I could sit back, let the professionals do the work, and I would interject now and again, and it was really, really good, I have to say. Also in this, there are the other ghost stories, which she wrote later on to try and recapture the success of The Woman in Black, but unfortunately they never did as well. So looking in here, it also has Dolly, The Man in the Picture, Printer's Devil Court, and The Small Hand, all of which were published between 2007 and 2012. So you know, she sort of tried to get back to that, and whether they're any good, I don't know. I have the suspicion that I'll probably read this and find that one of the later ones I probably enjoy more, but we'll see. I'm often perverse that way. Comes with a silk ribbon marker, which is something that folios don't, which I think they should. I think that should be standard in special editions. So there you go. And this is $16.99 if you fancy it. Not bad. Earlier on I spoke of Melville and spoke of rereading, and even though I've got a nice Penguin drop caps edition of Moby Dick, my original Penguin is gone. It went in a clear out when I bought the Penguin drop caps, which is a small little hardcover. It's downstairs, I don't have it here. So I decided I needed, I'm going to reread, I wanted a bigger edition with bigger pages and a bigger font because it's a big book. So I decided to get this very handsome Penguin Deluxe edition of Moby Dick. And this has been around for years and years. This is $16.99 as well. It has a deckled edge, you see there, it's all rough, which is really, really nice. Some people call it an American cut, but it's really a deckled edge, and it has wraps too as well. And of course this is a fantastic book, so really nice to get that. I don't know when I'm going to get around to it, but I just wanted one that I could pick up because it is a large book. It's not as large as I remember. It's actually only about 600 pages, which means that compared to something like the Book of the New Sun, you know, it's a cakewalk. So there you go. Also, recently, those wonderful people at Valanc Books, James at Valanc Books, sent me some books because he was very pleased. After the Chris Priest video, they sold, in 1 week, they sold 600 copies of The Glamour, and I think it's continued to do well. And that's the US edition with the text based on the Valanc edition in the UK, the final revision of The Glamour, which is not my preferred text. My preferred text is the first revision, which is the Doubleday hardcover in the US, and there was a book club edition from Doubleday as well, and in the UK it's the Abacus edition. Doesn't matter which cover you've got, the Abacus edition, or which format, it's in the Abacus one. So they said, you know, do you want, is there anything you like as a little gift? So I said, well, you know, I quite fancy this. I do like your books, and I'm going to do something about Valanc, and I'll review all these books when I do it to give you an idea of the sort of thing that Valanc do, because I think they're really great publisher. But they sent me some things, and they sent me Familiar Spirit by Lisa Tuttle, which is her first Singleton novel. Of course, her first novel was a collaboration with George R.R. Martin, who she had a relationship with then, back in the 70s. It's called Windhaven. And this is her first novel, which is a horror novel, Familiar Spirit. And it's in the Paperbacks from Hell livery, which are managed by Valanc. And of course, there's the Paperbacks from Hell book by Grady Hendrix, which, if you don't know, there is a video on the channel that features it. And I'm looking forward to this because I like Lisa's horror books, and I haven't read that one. So there you go. This one is not available in the UK for copyright and market reasons. That means that another publisher owns the rights, even though they're not publishing it. They could sue Valanc if they, or they could sue anybody trying to sell it in the UK. So this was sent to me direct from Valanc, though I think you can get it on Amazon. So there you go. Lisa Tuttle later was married to Christopher Priest, funnily enough, and she lives in Scotland. She's from Texas originally. Never met her, always wanted to. This is a bit of a curio, a book which didn't have many printings back in the 60s, and this is Only Lovers Left Alive by Dave Wallace. I'll just show the rear of the jacket. And this is one of those sort of hippie era things. I think it came out 64, 65. And it's one of those sort of near future dystopias where young people take over the world. There was a Roger Corman film called Gas, and there's a sort of epidemic of mass suicides of mature people in this, as they think the world has turned to, well, to doo-doo, and they do away with themselves, and young people take over. And I've been aware of this for a long time. I've never read it. Apparently the Rolling Stones liked it. So that's going to be an interesting one. So there'll be a review of that coming up. And cracking little cover there, really is, showing revolutionary types. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That actually reminds me of the Quatermass Conclusion, as it's called in America, Quatermass in the UK, what I call Quatermass 4, the final Quatermass serial, which is set in a dystopian future, and there are youth gangs everywhere, is just part of it. But yeah, cracking stuff. Finally, in my little Valanc pile is a copy of The Glass Cage by Colin Wilson, which I've just reread, and I will review that. I had the original Village Press version. I still got it, but I'm going to sell it, which is in a total state. A very rare book, and a very hard book to find. This is a mid-60s existentialist murder mystery from Colin, but not in the conventional sense of a crime novel. It has more affinity with his first novel, Ritual in the Dark, which is one of my favourite books. And it was never one of my favourites. I've just reread it, and I'll talk about that when I do a Valanc feature. But yeah, very nice. Great to have those. So thanks very much, James, for sending me those. Very kind of you. Also, a friend of mine sent me his new book, courtesy of his publisher, which is Terminal Press. This is Terminal Transmissions by Paul A. Green, courtesy of Paul and Rick McGrath, the publisher at Terminal Press. And both Paul and I were contributors to Deep Ends, the annual Ballardian anthology, which ran for 10 years and is now defunct, published by Terminal Press. And he signed it for me. Let's have a look. Can we see his signature? We've only met once, but we interacted online. There you go. It's his signature, little dedication. Great stuff. And this is short stories in a Ballardian homage style, which Paul is very adept at. There's also 2 or 3 critical essays in here, which I have read, and they're excellent. If you want a bit of Ballardian criticism of Ballard's work, I mean, you can go no wrong, and you can get this on Amazon. Really, really good and excellent. So if you're a Ballard scholar, you love this. I'm not quite sure how much it is, but you will find it on Amazon UK and in the States and Canada as well, because Terminal Press are Canadian. Great stuff. Thanks for that, Rick and Paul. Lovely job. One for the Ballardian Library, which, as you know, is vast. Then, this is something I got through work. I'm just going to show this. I'm probably not going to read it. It comes out in June. This is a proof copy, an ARC as the kids call it, advanced reading copy of a book by somebody called Caroline Lear called Love, Sex and Frankenstein. Now, I will be quite honest and say, as soon as I see anybody picking something up, riffing on a previous work of literature, whether it's a classic, you know, and by that I mean a Greek or Roman classic, like the massive wave of feminist retellings of classical literature and those sort of things, I just sigh. And, you know, versions of 1984 written from Julia's point of view and all this sort of thing. Because, okay, supposedly they're revisionist texts, they're recursive texts, they're postmodernist texts. Most of them, really, quite frankly, are just an excuse to try and make some money, because the novelty of that idea hasn't worn off yet on the chattering classes. And this basically, let me tell you what it's about. 18-year-old Mary Shelley has fled London with her lover Percy Shelley and her sister Claire. Tormented by Shelley's betrayals, haunted by the loss of their baby, and suspicious of her sister's intentions, Mary seeks a refuge. But Lord Byron's villa, lying under ominous ash-shrouded skies, feels more like a trap. So she's drawn to Lord Byron. So, you know, this is all very well and groovy, but, you know, maybe it's a work of genius. But, you know, the thing with these things that really annoys me is often they're read by people who haven't read the original writers, haven't read the original book, don't know the background, and people read these things and they often take them up as being sort of factual in some way, and I find that really irritating. So I probably won't read that. The one which irritated me the most recently, and I can't think what it's called, and I can't think it was by, and I'm quite glad in it because I don't want to give it any oxygen of publicity. there was a retelling of Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, and the jacket and the blurb were sort of going on about how it was a sapphic retelling. If you've actually read Carmilla, Carmilla is mildly sapphic anyway. That's always been one of its selling points. It's always been something that's been debated because it has sapphic elements all the way through it. To make them explicit isn't really doing anything new. It's just underlining what was already there. So I say to these sort of writers, do something original. Come on. Anyway, rant over. Something I came across in work, and I didn't know it was out, it came out late last year, and I don't know how I missed it, probably because I hadn't looked at this publisher's catalogue for a while, is this by James Sallis, What You Were Fighting For. Very handsome, I think you'll agree. This is published by No Exit Press, the wonderful Ian Mills, who's been doing a fine job with noir fiction in the UK since, gosh, the 80s, and once sent me a signed, numbered, limited Eddie Bunker book. Really, really nice of him. Never met him, but lovely chap. And James Sallis, of course, is the author of Drive. Back in the 1960s, he wrote avant-garde new wave stories for New Worlds. And James reached out to me a while ago, actually. He got in touch with me. He sent me an email because I brought up his book, his other collection of short stories, Time's Hammer. And I mentioned that in, I think, my top USA New Wave video, sort of top 10 US New Wave. James Sallis, fantastic writer. This is a short story collection, and it's got all sorts of things in this. It has SF, fantasy, crime, mainstream stories, really, really good. And it's got this kind of Ballardian cover of a drained swimming pool. But yeah, you know, absolute literary superstar, probably not as well known as he should be, but when he reached out to me, I was really touched by that. So I was really pleased to come across this. I like it when because I'm usually so in touch with what's going on, I love it when I come across something I wasn't expecting, which is really great. So yeah, don't know when I'll get to read it, but marvellous stuff. It does remind me that at some point before too long, and I've been kind of putting it off, I need to pin down a copy of his original short story collection, which is called A Few Last Words, which was only published in the USA. All the material in it was reissued in Time's Hammer, which is itself out of print now. And there are copies out there secondhand. They're all in the States, so the postage is an issue. So I must get a copy of A Few Last Words, and I want to get a spiffing one. So, you know, I might have to save the pennies for that. So James Sallis, great stuff. What else have we got? Ending with a little bit of history. One of my intentions in retirement, which is some years off, is not just to reread a lot of the books I have, but to read more history. And they're changing the liveries on books by Tom Holland. And I really like this cover design for Persian Fire, which is about the war between the Persians and the Greeks. And this is important background reading for understanding Gene Wolfe's Latro sequence, Soldier in the Mist, Soldier of Arete, and those things. So and I really like Tom Holland. He's a fantastic broadcaster, so I bought that. Very beautiful, I think you'll agree. So I am very interested in classical history, and I do feel I should know a lot more about it. I've got lots of bits and quite a bit of detail, but I lack the connective tissue at times, which brings me to the final book for this book haul, which I've been meaning to buy for ages. So I finally got around to it yesterday, and that's The Classical World, An Epic History of Greece and Rome by Robin Lane Fox, who is the world authority on Alexander the Great and teaches, I think he's retired now, taught classics at Oxford for years and years and years. He taught a friend of mine, actually, my friend Nathan. Hi, Nathan, if you ever watch these days. And Robin Lane Fox said, my friend Nathan, you're one of the best history students I've had, which is high praise indeed. But then Nathan is a good chap, intelligent guy. So it's a chunky tome. So that's going to be my go-to book to fill in those gaps in my knowledge of the classical world. Fantastic. So that's Greece and Rome, of course. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. As you see, an absence of much SF, but that's because the next sort of update I do of recent acquisitions, collector's diary, whatever I call it, will be pretty much an SF one. And until then, well, there'll be other stuff before, of course. So I'll see you again soon. Hope you've had a nice Easter. Bye for now.